Gather round, everybody. I mean, everybody. For today, City Skylines 2 Colossal Order published an apology, along with some refunds and promised compensation, some future updates, and some delays too. Let's talk what was probably the biggest update about Cities 2 since the game's release. With subscribe-worthy timecards below, let's roll. And taking it from the top, let's start with their sitrep and apologetic paragraph. They say, "We see and understand the disappointment many of you have expressed with City Skylines 2 and beachfront properties subsequently. They asked for patience and support, and we've shown those, and in return, quote, we let you down," end quote. They believe that they could make up for the shortcomings of the game in a time frame that was unrealistic and rushed out a DLC that should not have been published in its current form, and that is their words. They go on to say, quote, "For all this, we are truly sorry," end quote. They conclude this section by saying, they've made promises before, they've pledged to keep making improvements, they'll continue to do that, but the speed and magnitude of those improvements has been unacceptable, and that has lost player trust, and they want to do better. This is probably the most open, transparent apology, and indeed an apology that includes the word sorry, and truly sorry at that we've seen from Colossal Order to date. And in my opinion, it sets the tone for the rest of this week's update, a marked step away from some of the kinds of things and the way that we've discussed things previously when we've reflected on these updates, and moving into something a little bit different. Let's now delve into the real detail, the crux of it, refunds and compensation. So as part of this new step forward, the new way forward for City Skylines 2, what's going on? They say the very first thing they're going to do is compensate those who have purchased beach properties. The latest DLC, of course, with negative reviews, so overwhelmingly negative, I struggle to come up with words to describe them. And this was, of course, not a surprise to anybody following along in this story. So, how do they plan to make amends? They say that they'll change the pack to be a free addition to the game, refunding it to the greatest extent possible and providing additional content within the Ultimate Edition. And this is, of course, where there's a bit of a catch, because if it's part of the Ultimate Edition, well, this refund is more compensation than refund. They say, unfortunately, it will not be possible to offer refunds for Ultimate Edition buyers. This is due to the distribution of the Ultimate Edition across digital and physical storefronts, which creates significant complexities for executing a partial refund. Quote, "We realize that this is far from ideal, especially given the dedication those who have stayed with us since launch have shown. We are committed to repaying that loyalty, and therefore, we will compensate the Ultimate Edition holders by adding 3 creator packs and 3 radio stations, which together sum up to the value of $39.99 US. This solution hopefully ensures that you, regardless of purchase method, feel you receive fair compensation." End quote. So, what did we just hear? Well, if you purchased beachfront properties separately, like I did, then you and I will be getting a refund. Essentially, keep the 10 or 20 beachfront properties and the 4 palm trees for free. It's free stuff now. We'll give you your money back. If, however, you pre-ordered the Ultimate Edition way back when, you, unfortunately, won't be eligible for a refund due to complexities, and instead, 3 creator packs and 3 radio stations will be added to the Ultimate Edition in place of the Beach Properties DLC. They also say, interestingly here, that they'll total $39.99 US, around 2/3 of the total of the game at full price by itself. That is quite some value that is assigned there. So, perhaps you'll consider yourselves lucky. It is, of course, a little bit of a mixed bag here, but ultimately, it should end up with a win-win. As far as I can see it, this is more content. However, that may not surprise you, especially the diligent watchers, that this new content will of course come at a cost, and that cost will be time. Let's move on to paragraph 3 on future updates and DLC. Here in paragraph 3, we're talking about future updates for Cities 2, but not just the game itself, also some kind of broader managerial back-end functions, if you will, behind Cities 2. Let's just jump into it and see what they say. Looking ahead, they want to make immediate and meaningful changes. There are basically 3. The first one is a focus on improving the base game and modding tools. Here, read between the lines, we're probably talking patch updates. Secondly, they want to, quote, better involve you, the community, end quote, as they select their priorities moving forward. Additional free patches, game updates in the coming months before Colossal Order spends time on new paid content. This results, of course, in a shift. That paid content, the Bridges Imports expansion specifically, now shifted to some point in 2025. So, Ultimate Edition pass holders, the takeaway for you here, and indeed anybody interested in buying the DLC, is that you're going to have to wait a little bit longer while the team now prioritizes free updates to the modding tools, the base game, so on and so forth. On the back end side of things, but still potentially quite interesting, they say to make sure that they focus on the right things, they've put together an advisory meeting, a small group of player representatives, together with Colossal Order and Paradox Interactive, to discuss the development plan for the rest of the year. The people in the group are chosen for the size of their following within the community to represent as many as possible. The teams from Colossal Order and Paradox Interactive will provide them with full transparency, answering questions and critiques voiced. Their hope is that together with the community they can make sure that they don't repeat the same mistakes that they've made in the past and bring the game into a bright future, and a bright future that the bones, the core of the game, I believe absolutely deserves. It's unclear to us how large this group is, who's in it. I assume that will become obvious as time moves forward, but for now, that's all we know. One final caveat that was mentioned in this paragraph: the creator packs that are being added to the Ultimate Edition are being produced independently and will not take up focus from the core team who are working to improve the game. Will not take any focus, in fact, away from that core work. I thought that was an interesting point just to add in here to round out our understanding. Now let's move on to, unfortunately, some future further delays for another significant group of Cities players. Or perhaps not players, unless I'm talking about Cities Skylines 1. Indeed, it's time to focus on the console release, something that the team have been shockingly quiet about in recent times. They say they want to address the pending console release. As you know, the plan was to release it in spring of this year. That would be Northern Hemisphere sometime around now-ish. They have been hesitant to communicate an actual release window because of the uncertainty they're facing, and to not make further promises they mightn't be able to keep. They say, "We have been struggling to get Cities Skylines 2 to the necessary level of optimization for a console release, but are now hopeful that an upcoming build delivery in April will demonstrate sufficient progress for us to progress with a release candidate, and then a release build targeted for October. Before we have seen and evaluated the progress made in these builds, however, we will not be able to confirm the release date, and even then, some uncertainty also remains. Our ambition is to deliver the experience that you all deserved at launch, but it will take time. It's important to note that the team working on the console release operates separately from our PC development team, so it will be progressing without splitting our focus or time." End quote. Now, that was quite a long quote, a lot of wordiness around some uncertainty, different versions of builds, but at the crux of it, they're targeting a release build for October 2024. Around 6 months away from the time of recording, and there's also some reassurance that PC development is separate or operates separately from the team working on the console release. Now, I'll let you read into how far that separation goes, i.e. how far up the chain do you have to get until it's the same body. I have no idea. An important thing to mention nonetheless though, given how much pressure is under City Skylines 2, or is under the team producing it, I should say. Speaking of which, they have one more paragraph, a closing paragraph, signed off not just by the CEO of Colossal Order this week, but also by the Deputy CEO of Paradox Interactive. So let's take a look at that and then round out everything we've discussed, because it was certainly a significant vocal-voiced update from the team this week. In closing, they want to reaffirm their dedication to making Cities 2 the best city builder it can be, appreciate their support and feedback, hope to regain trust moving forward, acknowledging it's their responsibility to earn it, and they hope that these actions are a first step in the right direction. Deeply grateful for continued passion for the game. Please stay tuned, they say, for further updates on the game and the refund process, and thank you for being part of the community. And that rounds out their update. So what are actually those actions that they're talking about? These actions, the first step. Well, Beachfront Properties is no longer a paid DLC. After a bombshell launch, highly disappointing, that has now become free content for future City Skylines 2 buyers to enjoy. If you already had the Ultimate Edition, you will instead have somewhat of a replacement on offer, with 3 new creator packs and radio stations being added to the Ultimate Edition in place of that paid slot that used to be reserved by the Beachfront's DLC. Everything else inside of the Ultimate Edition, the future announced expansions for Cities 2, have been delayed. Most importantly, that Bridges and Waterfronts DLC, now scheduled for sometime in 2025. My take is it's nice to see them say sorry. It was something that a lot of people have been asking for. They've sort of flirted with a little bit, maybe skirted around the edges of it, but never properly landed on it. I think this is their best attempt so far, so kudos to them. Credit where credit is due. It's also nice to hear a renewed, if not increased, focus on City Skylines 2, the base game, because do we know it? It still needs some significant improvement. Performance at the greater end, at cities perhaps with 6-figure populations, just one pivotal point that still needs to be addressed for Cities 2 to take a spot that it hopefully, or indeed I suspect, will take one day, right up at the top of the city building throne, if you will. However, that day is still some ways off, and of course, the team still have much to prove. Will these words translate into tangible actions? The first step will be to refund and replace or compensate for the beachfront nightmare. And then, of course, we'll have to wait and see moving forward. Thank you so much for joining me in this big update from Colossal Order and Paradox Interactive today. I'll see you next time.